Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition, episode number 25 of the Lab Epstein Hitting Podcast. Talking today about internal and external cues. We pushed back our wood and aluminum bat episode that was supposed to air last week, but we decided to push that back and reschedule it. And our thanks to Matt Young, another buddy of mine, for filling in last week. But joining me is renowned hitting instructor, professional evaluator, my former coach, friend, and co-host, back and in living color, Jake Epstein. I hate that saying, back and in living color. Sounds really stupid.
Well, it's the living part is good. Yeah. So black and white can go either way. You know, I'm okay with the old black and white movies too. But yeah, I mean, it really puts you in the forefront of technology when you say that.
Just for the record, I wanted to make something clear to everybody. With what Jake said right there, he was not dying last week. He just had something he had to attend to. So
yes,
yeah.
And we could talk about it a little bit because it's my dad. My dad, he had surgery last week, but he's doing well and he's getting stronger and he's discharged from the hospital. So, but it was a little scary there for a few days. So we were at his side trying to rally him through the surgery and. Now he's good for another 77 years, they said.
Good. Yeah, I like that. Yes, Mike, the legendary Mike Epstein, is going. It's going well. He's from what you and I have talked about, so that's always good news. And again, today we're talking about internal and external cues. By the way, I want to bring up a couple of points before we get into that topic. Did you see Giancarlo Stanton's 2 home runs the other night?
Mm-hmm.
You did.
I did.
Yeah. Well, so the attack and launch angle episode, we just released that on our YouTube page, by the way. It's in our archived episodes folder, I guess, on YouTube. And I saw some data from the Stanton home runs the other night. I wanted to share it with you and get your opinion. His first home run, that was the line drive to right. The exit velocity, 114 miles per hour, 15-degree launch angle. His second home run, 458 feet, which I don't really believe. I think it was closer to like 500.
God, it looked like it, didn't it?
Yeah. But the exit velocity was 118 miles per hour. And the launch angle, this is what I found interesting, 11 degrees. And it was a towering drive rather than just that line drive that kept rising. So why was the launch angle higher on that line drive than the higher ball that was hit?
I don't think it could have been. So that must have been some kind of misread.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that would have been impossible.
Okay.
11 degrees, unless he had like some kind of 10,000 degree backspin that made it rise, like golf balls, something like that. But yeah, I would say that was probably a misread on the calculator. And I'm trying to remember what I saw when it first happened, versus what may have showed up in StatCast. But
well, that's why I got
what I did notice is, Stanton's, and this is just, players are different. He doesn't have a bad swing plane. He doesn't pick up balls. I don't think he has advanced vision, that other guys do. I don't think he has the ability to make adjustments with his timing to hit breaking balls because he's feast or famine. Like when he's hot, he's really hot for 6-7 games. And when he's not hot for 25 games. And when he hits it, it's a thing of beauty, but there's no consistency to that. And it's hard to, find that lightning in a bottle at the right time. And fortunately for the Yankees, they did. He kind of heated up for a couple games at the right time. But then you saw last night where the poor guy, he knows he's getting breaking balls. And he's so frustrated that he's swinging at breaking balls in the dirt that he ends up taking them when they're strikes. And I feel for the guy because I'm telling you, that guy may take more BP swings than anybody in the game. I mean, he works so hard before batting practice, after batting practice, in the middle of the game if he's DHing. He is constantly swinging, and he takes such pride in his work. But, not everybody has that hit ability, and we look at that home run he hit to right field. That's his BP swing. That says, hey, throw the ball up and away. I'm going to hit a low line drive to right field.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, oh, that's just what he does, like every day in BP. And then the one he turned on, it was just like, oh my God, he just got his bat hit out in front, but it was on that same plane. What I found very interesting on the bomb, the 458 or whatever it was that he hit it at a very high. Now he's strong, and the balls are, from what I've heard, 2 people removed. I spoke to a guy that has a lot of buddies that are MLB pitchers, and then what the MLB pitchers said last year, the balls were hard. This year they're ridiculous. That was the exact quote. So, sure. I think the balls are a little harder, so you're getting higher exit velocities on home runs. Usually your 118s are like line drives at the shortstop, or line drives at the second baseman. They're low liners that you square up more. So for him to launch a ball, that far and that high at that speed, typically you have to swing up a little bit more, and he didn't. Like, I looked at his swing plane, and he still probably only hit that ball with an attack angle close to 10 degrees, where a lot of guys that hit the ball hard and high like that will have to, swing up more and kind of dump the barrel a little bit and then catch it just right to hit it that way. And they'll be swinging up at maybe 18 degrees. He was still really flat to it. So it was a beautiful swing. Now, it should be a beautiful swing. It was like a top of the 5 fastball right down the middle of the plate. We shouldn't have to do too much to hit that ball hard, but he definitely took advantage of it. And then, sorry, I'm rambling here, but then Judge, yesterday I watched Judge home run. I got back late, and Judge hit a home run. Let me see it. And it was, that's him. That's him. I'm strong, and I'm gonna get beat, and I'm gonna hit a fly ball to right field that goes 325 feet. And in New York, when he hits it a little bit better than that, and it goes 360 to right center, it goes out of the park. So I'm not downplaying Judge, but that's his model, is kind of that right center high fly ball that's going to carry out of the park, versus a Stanton that's totally different barrel path, totally different launch. I shouldn't say launch angle, but ball flight that he hits. It's just Judge, I think, is more of a complete hitter that can make adjustments. And going a step further, I think Voit is even more of a complete hitter, or will be more of a complete hitter, because I'll tell you what, he looked so. I know he struck out last night at the end, and towards the end of the game, but I'll tell you what, he had. I mean, that Castillo's awesome, but he swung. He was right on so many breaking balls, so many sliders, and he just missed them because they were just good pitches. One backed up and didn't come back, but it was like he was right on him. He was anticipating. He was thinking the right way. He got the pitches. He just, wasn't able to execute. He just kind of got, I guess maybe overmatched by. I don't think overmatched is the right word, but he got beat by a guy that was throwing really well. So anyway, there's our meat of the order Yankee breakdown for all our East Coasters, because baseball only occurs on the East Coast.
So I've heard.
There's nothing else that happens.
No. Oh. Let me ask you. See, that was a punish. You dropped your computer or phone there. That was punishment. Instant karma, as they say. Let me ask you this. Just this is a hypothetical, and I'm glad you talked a lot about the Yankees there, because your friend, of course, is their assistant hitting coach. So you kind of gave him a rub there. But how far? Again, hypothetical, just for fun. How far do you think Stanton's home run would have gone in Yankee Stadium? Do you think it would have gone like Barry Bonds type home run circa, 2003 at Yankee Stadium, when he hit that ball to right field, and John Miller's famous call was, "This is heading for New Jersey."
Now Barry Bonds comes up. Let's listen in.
Number 25, Barry Bonds, designated hitter. Number 25.
Bonds at slightly open stance, feet fairly close together, crowding the plate. The pitch, there's a long one to right field. Forget about it. This one is headed for New Jersey, high into the upper deck. Barry Bonds with a spectacular 3-run homer.
I don't get it. Like, I feel like it should be that far.
Yeah.
And Yankee Stadium, when you pull balls into right field, I remember my dad saying he used to hit balls up in the upper deck there. Kind of all that, like in BP, it was it was humorous. Like, it was so fun for him, to try to hit balls up there. I don't know. I don't get it. I think back to, my dad playing and telling me that guys used to hit balls 500 feet all the time.
Right.
And I'm like, really? You think that? And he's like, yeah. He's like, I would probably hit 2 or 3 a year. Frank Howard would hit 10 or 11 a year just at RFK Stadium in Washington. And because they went back and measured it. So they used to hit balls, and they would paint the seats when they hit in the upper deck at the old ballpark. They paint the seats. I guess my dad one year hit 4 or 5 and Hondo hit, 10 or 11, something like that. And they went back years later before they tore the stadium down, and they measured them at like 510 feet or 515 feet to get it to the upper deck. And so I'm thinking to myself, these guys were, my dad was big. Hondo was a monster, but he wasn't like a Stanton or Judge monster. He wasn't like a fit monster. He didn't lift weights. He was just
big bone,
6'7".
Yeah.
But the difference was Hondo used like a 36-inch bat and a 35-ounce bat. It was like a 36-35. My dad used a 35, sometimes a 35-34. Like, does the mass of the bat make that much difference? I would love to give Judge and Stanton on a launch monitor and give them Soriano's bat, a 35-35 or a 36-35, something just massive, and see their bat speed go down probably a little bit. But I'd love to see if the ball really went that much farther. I mean, science says it will if it's swung at the same rate, but what is that trade-off? Do we trade, we give them a bigger bat and they go down 1 or 2 miles an hour at bat speed, but now all of a sudden the exit velocity's, 1 or 2 miles an hour harder? Well, that's a good trade right there.
Right.
I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, I did a little test with a high school guy once. We went from a 32-inch metal bat or something like that, and then I gave him a 34-inch wood bat. Yeah, and again, we weren't, facing velocity or anything. I was just throwing in batting practice. And he hit the ball much harder with the wood bat that was heavier. Yeah. So, anyway, that kind of stuff would be – I don't see how these balls don't go 500 feet.
Yeah.
Seriously. It just seems like they
are. For context, by the way, you mentioned something there with the ballpark in Washington. Are you talking about RFK Stadium?
Mm-hmm.
That's still around, by the way.
Oh, is it really? They
play.
That thing?
No, they play. When I lived in D.C., a friend asked me if I wanted to go to one of the soccer matches.
Oh, they do.
They play.
Okay.
What are they called? I don't remember. So anybody email us. Anybody who is listening in the D.C., Maryland area, the Nova area, Northern Virginia area. Their soccer team plays there. So for people out there, the RFK Stadium, it's still around.
It's still there.
Context,
I would actually like to go there. I was there they used to play this old timers game. Oh my goodness. So I was probably 13. So we're looking at 1990. So right around the 90s, it was the American versus National. It was an all-star old timers game. I mean, I remember this vividly, and I still have, my mom took so many pictures, right? But I mean, everybody was there. Mantle was there, right? Yeah. Willie Mays was there. Mike Epstein was there for some reason, as he likes to tell people. DiMaggio, like everybody who was anyone was at this thing, and they televised it. And I remember that was the only time I've ever been to RFK. So I'll have to go back. Maybe I'll take my dad back. That'd be fun.
Yeah. To a soccer. I don't know how much he's into soccer.
I don't think we're probably going to stay for the soccer game.
Okay.
And I'm thinking our audience isn't a big U.S. like Major League Soccer. Possibly. Well, there's one guy that might be.
Okay. Well, as we say, I hate this saying, but shout out to him. Yeah. By the way,
in living color.
Yes. I've stated this on the show before. I hate when people call ballparks, not saying you did this, but I'm saying I hate when people call ballparks, baseball ballparks, stadiums. They're not stadiums. They're ballparks.
But it's called RFK Stadium.
I know, and so is Yankee Stadium, but that's just in namesake. It's not a stadium, it's a ballpark. Although RFK Stadium, you could make the argument because it's a hollow,
they played football.
Big hollow, piece of garbage like, what's the one in Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and all those multi-purpose.
Yeah, right. Three Rivers.
Another little fun fact, by the way, about Mike Trout. He still has not won a playoff game. The Marlins have won more playoff games in the last 10 years than Mike Trout. Isn't that kind of sad? I mean, really, at this point.
I think the Marlins have won more playoff games than Mike Trout in the last year.
In the last 10 years, yeah.
The last 2 weeks.
The last 2 weeks, yes.
Has Trout even won one?
No. It's sad at this point. And Billy Epler, by the way, just got fired a week ago.
Yeah, I saw that.
And being in the business, I think you and I both know that these jobs can be very flimsy at times, and I don't wish anybody to ever be fired. But nevertheless, I think it really illustrates a huge, at this point, baseball's at a reckoning point. Nobody talks about this except for people like you and I in the industry. Baseball's at a real standstill here with a disconnect between scouting and player development. I think we need, I'm not just giving you a rub because you're my podcast partner and friend and coach and whatever else I always say in the beginning of the show, but we need more people like you in the game who knows how to scout and look for players based off your hitting expertise, and we don't have that. I think there's just a huge. What do you think about that? I think there's a huge disconnect in scouting and player development where guys are being drafted, but they don't fit into the player development schemes and systems, and therefore they're not being developed. And I think that was a big problem with the Angels, except albeit with Joe Adell, but he's out of this world talented. I mean, not every guy. You got to be able to find the Luke Voits of the world, as you mentioned, and the Rays always uncover something with some guy, especially on the pitching side. You have to, I believe, you have to be able to do that on the player development side. And it starts with the proper scouting, but having that proper communication, what you want as a player development department. And it's not done well in baseball right now.
Yeah, there's so many different ideas, I think, that people are searching. I do know the draft side of the Angels is, I'm good friends with Eric Chavez, who played, for the A's for a while. He was a Yankee, played with the Diamondbacks, and so he's a special assistant to Epler. And I've had good conversations with him about draft guys. And he knows it because he's been in the game for 16 years, right? Yeah. So, hopefully data-driven guys are leaning on people like that have been in the trenches and they see things. And there was a player, I don't want to say names or give away too much, but there was a player that I was coaching that was supposed to draft pretty high. And so Eric came out and we, he watched a couple games and then we had dinner after and he gave me his thoughts and I didn't agree or disagree with any of what he said, but he had seen the guy for 2 or 3 days. I had seen him for 4 or 5 months and we were pretty close to a similar conclusion. Okay. Based on what he saw in a couple of bats. And it kind of blew me away because he's just sitting in the stands observing how foul balls are hit. And I was like, interesting. Pitches that, in between speeds, like, late on the fastball, early on the breaking ball. What is his plan? What is he looking for? And, that's a guy that's just experience oozes, from his pores. And you do have to have guys like that. I think the Orioles will be an interesting look at that. I think possibly the Phillies, because they've gone crazy into metric stuff in the minor league system. Right. And they've hired, I know the Orioles really cleaned house and brought in a bunch of kind of like young guys that may not have a big background on professional baseball, but know the swing maybe and know data.
But do they have that wisdom and experience like you do, or like you just mentioned with Xavi as well? Right, that's my point.
There's none of that. So do you have a mixture? Do you have these guys in there, and then you have a rover or somebody, or a couple rovers that are bringing in the other side of it? I don't know. I really don't. I know that baseball has succeeded fairly well for the last, 150 years.
Yeah.
On, but it doesn't mean that you can't make it better. What I'm afraid of is, we make things worse. Mm-hmm. We hurt players. There's certain players that are going to be stars, and and it's always been this way. And there's certain players that are going to be big leaguers, and you just see it in the way that they move and the way that they react. And then you provide them with knowledge, mm-hmm. and then they become superstars. But are we taking away from those guys? Are we going to mess some of those guys up, or is all the data going to find the guys that are 20 and 30 rounders and maybe make them better? So only time will tell whether it'll know, but you definitely need both. That's why I feel like the people that know both, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but I kind of have that. I started with data early, so I know what works and what doesn't work, instead of just, it has to be this number. And then you say, you know what, this player doesn't need that data. Or this player, man, you show them that data and they're like, whoa, okay, yeah. I need to adjust that. And then boom, it makes sense to them because they've grown up in an environment of technology and it makes sense to them. And maybe they could make a quicker change by knowing what the data is. So you definitely have to know who the audience is that you're teaching and working with. And then it can be, having both sides that can be valuable. Having guys that know the game and have been entrenched in the game for a long time versus young guys that just, know data and want to use data a lot more. And I don't know. We'll find out.
But you mentioned with sitting down with Eric Chavez, though, and you guys just talking baseball about this hitter and your experience, but also being able to mix in. I'm trying to articulate this here. It just seemed so easy with you and him. I know you guys have a previous relationship and are friends, but it just seems so. Yeah. Why can't communication be like that all the time, between player development staffers, and scouts? I don't know. Maybe is it jealousy? Is it ego? I certainly think it's a combination of both of those things, but I don't know. I don't.
No, you're right.
The new generation. I don't know why is it so easy with you and him, and you and I, but it's not easy. But it's not this way with other teams. I don't understand it. To me, I don't know.
Well, number one, we weren't part of the same organization, so maybe that was
okay.
One of the things that made it easy. And then yes, we go back, since we were 13 or 14 years old. But yeah, player development, and you're exactly right, and scouting.
Yeah.
They are two different branches of government, and they don't talk as much as they should. I know when I do reports for scouting, international scouting or U.S. scouting, regular draft scouting, I put in there what the player needs developmental-wise, mm-hmm. so that they can see both sides. They can see okay, this guy's got blah, blah, blah. There's no risk in his swing, but this is what he needs to add to be great, or this is what he needs to change. Are you willing to change it? And a lot of the scouting people don't trust the player development people to make those changes.
Yeah.
And it has to be, cohesive. They have to, I believe they have to all work together. Like you draft the guy and then you want to maintain that guy. It's kind of like buying a new car, right? You buy it from the sales guy, and then the sales guy's like, I'm out. Here's the service manager, right? You're going to deal with him for the rest of your life. But, I would want to have pride in, look, I drafted this guy. This was, one of our first guys. I want to see him through. Like here, here he is, the player development. Player development, this is what he needs to work on. And there really isn't that open communication there. They just hand them off.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, do what you do. And then if player development doesn't do their job,
right, then
who gets blamed? Not player development.
No. And that's,
right? Epler's the one that gets fired from that, and his staff that drafted those guys, the last 3 or 4 years. So it's a vicious game, but he's good. And the guys are so smart. I mean, these front office guys are so smart that, they'll resurface and then he'll do well. I'm trying to think of the, Preller, AJ, the Padres general manager. I mean, this guy, unbelievable. I mean, aside from, did he not have a physical? Who am I thinking of? The pitcher from Cleveland, Clevenger, right? Like, aside from that, I mean, this guy made moves. He was like a magician making moves this year.
Yeah, but that's not on him. That's not on him.
You know.
He didn't have a physical. That's on somebody on his staff that needs to be reprimanded.
That was rough.
He needs to be corrected.
That was a rough trade. Yeah. I mean, you trade for a guy, and now he's a free agent, right? Is Clevenger a free agent, or they still have him for next year?
I know Bauer's a free agent. I think Clevenger's a free agent. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe if he's not, then you're fine, right? You just kind of lost that. But what a bummer that was. But, I mean, he made great – and he doesn't always make great moves, but he made the great moves, this year. And that's kind of Epler, same way. Like, he was the Yankees. He made great moves, came to the Angels, and, bummer. We had a few bad years, and he'll end up somewhere else and do well, I'm sure.
So don't you think, just to tie a bow on this, though, don't you think – that there should be someone in the player development department who also has experience scouting that can communicate with scouts and say kind of what you were talking about there a moment ago and say, this is what needs to be done. These are our systems. And the scout can ask, do you think he could fit into this process? And he says, even if the scout really likes the player and says, I don't think he can, there has to be that bridge there. There's no real bridge that connects the two, I guess, between scouting and player development.
No, that's a great point. I mean, that would be, who do you have more faith in as a general manager? Do you have more faith in your player development people or your scouting people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then to have a comment like that or to have a conversation like that is, and those may happen. I haven't been privy to those conversations, but they totally could happen.
Yeah.
And that's, part of the role of what I do is, I'm looking at people that are drafting or signing internationally as a player development person. Mm-hmm. So we're going to draft this guy. What's the risk of, in the player development process, what does he do bad? What does he do well? And so I'm kind of like the first layer of that, like, oh, don't touch this. Don't even give this to player development. Mm-hmm. Like it's going to, it's going to ruin their life trying to fix what this player needs to do, or, hey, maybe it's just a rhythm thing. Maybe it's just getting his foot going, getting his rhythm going on time, or maybe it's a top hand or just one thing. And that's the risk assessment. And then, okay, we can put them into player development, and player development can hopefully get the most out of them.
We're going to take a quick break from the episode, and I want to speak about something that's sort of near and dear to my heart, and it's a direct connection with my baseball career. I played college baseball at LaSalle University. And on September 29th, the LaSalle community was shocked and saddened to learn that the university has decided to cut 7 programs from the school's athletic department. Baseball, softball, men's and women's, swimming and diving, tennis and volleyball. Baseball being the one, and I feel horrible for all the programs throughout the country, but especially at my alma mater. But baseball really, that program being cut, it hurts me deeply. And for me personally, I've experienced this. I was lucky enough to experience it. LaSalle is a tight-knit community. It's been held together by the identity of being an explorer, and especially with former athletes, being that LaSalle explorer. We always joke about how athletes don't have time to be in fraternities. You rarely see that. Their fraternity is their teams. And those teams that I just mentioned, and the baseball program especially, which is near and dear to me, that community is going away now. That's been taken away from more than 100 current athletes and thousands of more future prospective athletes. The baseball team, alumni, coaches, and parents have come together to not only make an attempt at saving the program, but to change the future of LaSalle forever. The team is hard at work building a plan to save our program, the school, the important values that are learned from being an esteemed member of the LaSalle community. I mean, the list goes on and on. I've been in contact with the person who was a former teammate of mine, actually, who was putting this together. And I think he's doing a great job with it. He's gotten Barstool Philly involved, Dave Portnoy involved with Barstool Sports. They just did a pizza review at the Explorer's Den. It's a great thing that James Santor is doing, former teammate of mine. So, again, they need to raise, we all do, we need to help. We need you to help raise awareness and funds for the cause, liking, sharing, retweeting, donating, etc. It's what's going on right now, and it's to help make this campaign successful. So please find all the relevant links at hashtag SaveLaSalleBase. Again, that is hashtag SaveLaSalleBase. You can also donate on the GoFundMe page at the LSU Base GoFundMe. Find it on Instagram as well, at Save LaSalle Baseball. And the mailing list also, Save LaSalle Base. Again, the easiest way to go, though, is to donate. The GoFundMe page, LSU Base, LaSalle University Baseball, and find it on Instagram as well at Save LaSalle Baseball. Okay, well, let's get into our topic today. Geez, we're already 25 minutes in. Good convo.
That was good. We had good content there.
Yeah.
Timely.
I hope everybody is listening very closely. I will. By the way, if that's a hill that I have to die on, I'll die on that hill of being on the side of scouting and scouts, and I will always be on that side. And I will always die on that hill of having that bridge, that one person in player development that understands the game fully, that has a scouting background that could be that bridge between scouting and player development. So, just for the record,
and that's
I'm
where
not
you
Mr.
see
on the
guys
fence
like
guy.
the good special assignment scouts or special. I know the guy with the Brewers is really good. The special assignment scout Scott Campbell's like really good at what he does.
Yeah,
and he's bright on all sides of the conversations I have with him. It's like, he knows mechanics. He knows he asks the right questions. He's got, he'll go see players. He knows what he's looking for. So when you have those special assistants, and that's what they're for. I mean, there's some special assistants that are just, figureheads. Hey, it's cool to have Willie Mays as a special assistant to the GM,
Right. Mm-hmm.
But they're
PR move,
the guys that get in the trenches are, some of those guys are really good.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, let's get into our topic today: internal and external cues. When talking with a hitter, or coaching a hitter, I should say. Let's first start, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast. We're on social media at Jim Tara, at Epstein Hitting. Our email address, jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. And, of course, check out our YouTube page as well, The Lab Epstein Hitting. We've got clips up there. We've got new archived episodes, whatever you want to call it, up there as well. So check that out. We're speaking about internal and external cues in hitting and training. Let's first break down what those terms are. External cues, to put it simply, they're instructions given to an athlete in hopes for a desired outcome. Internal cues streamline the process of the desired outcome by utilizing the mental side. How do you feel those definitions, Ep, mesh with coaching hitters? I mean, we talk about drills and we talk about certain cues that could help a hitter. Hey, get the foot down early. You don't mean literally get the foot down early. Again, it's just a mental cue. So how do those two definitions come together to help a hitter get better and reach his potential?
I think this is all hitting. All hitting is what comes out of your mouth as a coach and what goes into the brain as a player, external versus internal. It might be something like, looking back at Giancarlo's, home run the other day to right field, that low laser, straight away right,
sure,
which is like so hard to hit. Mm-hmm. And you may tell him, hey, I want you to, chop down. I want you to keep the barrel above your hands. That would be like an external cue, right? Keep the barrel above your hands. And he's like, okay. And that's what he works on all day. Well, when he makes contact, the barrel's never above his hands. But that thought process for him helps him not dump the barrel. So, it's what do you use? I say some of the silliest, that was a good word. That's a word because my 10-year-old's walking around the house right now. So I say some of the silliest.
That's a word. You're good.
It's a word.
Yeah.
Cues that make no sense except to the hitter that's trying to change something.
Yeah.
So having a vocabulary as a hitting instructor that you can say, and I believe it was John Wooden who said this, good coaches have the ability to tell a player you want to accomplish one thing, but they can give them 6 or 7 different ways of saying that to get the player to do it. You're trying to get a player to, hit a ball to the opposite field without slicing it too much, right? You may have way number 1, that didn't work. Way number 2, that didn't work. Yada, yada, yada. Now, all of a sudden, the 6th time you say something stupid, all of a sudden they get it. And then it's like, okay, put it on a piece of tape, put it in your helmet, write it down. And I want you to think about that every time you put your helmet on when you go to the plate, because that external cue, which may be something like, my clientele base that are listening, like the turd, we'll just say the turd. There's an analogy we use from day one certification, like 15 years ago. Yeah. The turd is there, which essentially translates into you want to work away from the ball. You don't want to jump at the ball. You want to work away from it. I'll be able to say that to a hitter, something very simple, and it reminds them of their internal feel of maybe sitting down on their back leg a little bit more during the stride or at launch, something like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned the terms there. When do the terms, your father once famously said that the mechanics that you preach in the Epstein hitting teaching system, they shouldn't really be taught to a player until they're about 9 or 10 years old because of the movements and their body's not fully developed. So how does that apply to internal and external cues? In other words, how do you know what? It seems like an obvious question, but it's really not. And I think coaches will get confused by this. How do you know what terms you can use that are less confusing, that can make hitting as simple as possible when you are teaching this hitting system, your hitting system, at ages 9 and 10, because the movements are high-level moves that you are teaching?
Yeah, so, I can dumb down drills for 8-year-olds by just telling them, do this, do this, do this. Mm-hmm. Hold the bat like this. Put the bat on top of your shoulder if we're doing a bottom hand drill. And all I want you to do is don't move your nose, don't move your chest. I want you and I'll just push them into that position or pull their arm into that position. Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Okay, replicate that move. And then, it may take them 20 or 30 swings to replicate it, but all of a sudden when they do it correctly, I get excited. That's it. You got it. Okay, replicate that same feel. And then I'll ask them, what are you thinking about here? What's going through your head? Oh, I'm thinking about this. That may be something totally different than what you as an instructor told them, but you have to bring that into your brain and be like, okay, so when Johnny's, doing this correctly, you have to say X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And so you can do that. Now with an older player, I would explain the move. So here's the move. This is why we want to do it. This, if your elbow goes this way, then your hand's going to go this way. If your hand goes, whatever, you got to keep this palm facing here. And then what happens is they'll do it right on the second or third swing because they're older, they have more control of their body, and maybe I explained it a little easier. So with younger players, it's more of a feel, let's feel this. With an older player, it may be more of, hey, meaning in the very beginning when you're first teaching it, it may be more, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to educate that older player so that down the road I don't have to spend as much time with it. They know the information. So when we, like, for instance, at the lab, if we have an elementary class, I know that one's going to be a lot more work. Even though I've seen these kids for 6 weeks in a row, it's just a lot, it's just their mentality. We got to organize them properly, get them into the right stations. We have to keep telling them the same thing. Hey, your back foot needs to go here. Your back foot needs to go here, right? Over and over. Where with the high school guys, they come in, we move on from changes, from rep to rep versus from week to week.
Right. What kind of internal, again, this is talking internal, we're talking mentally here. What kind of internal cues can a player use in the on-deck circle to prolong slumps from happening?
Usually it would be, it could be timing. Mm-hmm. I know with players that, for instance, if we talk about Voit yesterday, he was looking breaking ball, pretty much that whole at bat. And I believe the other night he hit a home run on a first pitch breaking ball, which most people will be like, wow, that's impressive. Well, first pitch breaking balls are really easy to hit because they're usually thrown for strikes. Pitcher wants to get an 0-0 pitch over. So if you're looking breaking ball 0-0, why are we doing that? Well, we're a threat, right? Why? Because we hit fastballs 0-0 really well. So now I'm going to change my thinking and try to get on the same page as that pitcher. And an 0-0 spinner down the middle or, catches a third of the plate instead of a corner, I'm going to launch that thing. So then the scouting report gets out on that, and then all of a sudden he'll start getting challenged with fastballs again. But, in the on-deck circle, you're talking yourself into that. All right, Meat, throw me that. One of my favorite scenes of any movie. And we'll say baseball movie because pretty much every scene in The Big Lebowski is my favorite scene. But You're talking about, Bull Durham when he's in the on-deck circle, he's sitting there and he turns around as he's coming from he's coming from the dugout to the on-deck circle, and he says, if this guy starts me off, with a curveball, I'm going to take him downtown. And so then he goes up to the on-deck circle, and they pan in on him, and he's like, come on, meat, come on. And he's walking up to home plate, and he's staring at the pitcher. Come on, throw me that weak-ass shit, is what he says.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, here's the first pitch curveball. He hangs it, and then, he hits it out of the park. Costner hits it out of the park, and he turns around to the dugout like, see? And that's hitting. Like, that didn't come from Costner. Although he's awesome. Everyone loves Costner. Well, I do because he's Fullerton guy. But, did that come from Augie Garrido, who was, kind of the baseball, specialist for that movie? Where did that come from? That came from somebody. That didn't come from somebody in Hollywood. And that's the kind of stuff I tell my players. Hey, I'd grab them right before they go into the on-deck circle. What are we doing here? Mm-hmm. Like, what's your plan? Okay, good. Go. I want you to visualize that plan in the on-deck circle. Time him up when he's throwing. Yeah. Figure out when to start moving. And then when the catcher throws the ball back, I want you to close your eyes for a second and visualize exactly your body getting into position to hit that pitch.
Yeah.
And, those are some. I mean, there's a lot, but those are some of those internal feels or internal cues that player might be thinking of right before they get up to the plate, to have that competition.
This might be kind of low-hanging fruit, the point I'm about to bring up, but it goes back to what coaches talk about a lot, and you've talked about it on this podcast before as well. Hitting is a conversation with a hitter at any level, any age.
It is. I mean, it's fun. I mean, if it's not fun, then you're doing the wrong thing. I mean, that's probably or you're not smart enough. You don't study enough. You don't read enough. You don't watch enough. I think that's one of the problems is, people always say, Jake, why is this better than that? And I'll say, do you know how many swings I look at every single day? Like, I pull swings. I look at highlights. I'm looking at what players do and what players don't do.
Yeah.
And that's how I make my decisions. Well, this works. And you know what? I don't see this working as well. Therefore, I'm not going to teach this. I'm going to teach this. And I don't think enough people do that.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately. And it seems like it's more so we forget about the importance of internal and external cues, and we just talk about mechanics and how one size fits all. And while there's and I think, again, it goes back to our conversation earlier about player development. I think on the hitting side of things and on player development, for some reason I don't see it in pitching. I see it a lot more in hitting. I don't understand why. I think maybe the constant failure in hitting makes people crazy, but I just see it so much where it's turning into one size fits all, and scouts are saying, "Well, that size doesn't fit him. We drafted him because of this," and it's the same thing. It's the same thing what we're talking about today, where one language doesn't. And we had an episode earlier about vocabulary and hitting vocabulary, but one language doesn't always fit everybody. It's not a one size fits all type deal.
Not at all. No, and you have to be able to change based on the player, and then you got language barriers, right? So that plays a huge part in this as well. Yeah, you have coaches that speak a little Spanish. Mm-hmm. You have players that speak a little English. Then you throw in the Korean guys and the Japanese guys, and you're like, oh my Lord, if everyone was from Curacao, we'd be okay because they just speak 5 languages each, and we can, they can get by. But it is the language part of it is a little bit tougher, and that's when you have to use cues and feels, and it really helps players, and then you have to show how excited you are when they do it right, because they may not be hearing everything that you're saying, that you're trying to dictate to that player, but they know based on your body language that they did it right. And then they're like, okay, well, I was thinking about this, that, and the other. I'm going to replicate that move. That's going to make the coach be excited. Mm-hmm. But again, you got to have respect for your coach. How many guys aren't respected? So many of them. I mean, I don't know how many of these 25-year-old hitting coaches are getting a lot of respect initially, when they're coaching guys that are 20, 21, 22 years old, so that's a different dynamic too. You have to, as a good coach, you have to command respect of your players, but you also have to be in their corner, and they have to know that that you love them and you want them to be great. And if they don't get that feel, that's where experience comes from. You don't get that feel, it's going to be tough. I think that's where the Padres hit it hard. I think Tingler went in and said, you know what, this is my first time managing. I'm going to hire like 2 bench coaches to help me out. Like totally selfless guy. I don't need to be macho guy, but he's such a good communicator, and he does speak fluent Spanish, and he's able to, he's young where he has the energy and he gets behind the guys, but he commanded this amount of respect that really kind of blew me away this year. And I thought that was a really cool dynamic that they built there in San Diego.
Yeah. We've heard stories with Davey Martinez in Washington, too, surrounding himself with kind of old school baseball people that have helped him in his managerial career get to where he wants to go in terms of that knowledge and gaining that wisdom. By the way, Mike Rizzo for the Nationals also does that. He has one analytical person that sits with him in his booth next to him every game. They have an analytics department and they have a scouting department, but he comes from a scouting background. But he also has Bob Boone. Bob Boone once told me this personally, by the way. He has Bob Boone next to him almost every game as well, so he's getting it from both sides in his left ear, in his right ear. And I think that's kind of the best way to go, don't you? I mean, seems ideal. And it's easier said than done. But it seems ideal.
It does seem like a pretty good strategy. It worked out okay for him last year, I guess. But yeah, I mean that's a guy who's not too big for his position.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's a general manager in a large market baseball team, and he's leaning on people to make him better. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the sign of any good leader, any good management.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's baseball, like life, it always comes full circle, doesn't it? I mean, it always goes back to that, just to kind of put a bow on what we're talking about conversation here. It always goes back to that, having a conversation and knowing thy hitter to best set them up for that success. One internal cue that you maybe it was an external cue, I'm not sure now. I have to go back and look at the definitions that I said earlier in the show, but of what each one is. But you gave me an instruction once, and I still remember to this day. You drew a chalk line where my foot was supposed to land, and you drew it at an angle to where it was supposed to land, at that 45-degree angle to help create that torque. So that's kind of right there a huge cue, but it was explained in a way that was very, very simple that I could understand, and then I guess visualize in my own head to get the job done and do it correctly and learn that new habit.
Yeah, no, I remember that, and I think you were probably 20 at the time, 19 at the time.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I think I treated you like you were an 8-year-old, if I remember correctly. So I said, if you step over this line and your foot slips off the edge of the cliff, then you're going to fall off the cliff and die. And I think that would have been your internal cue. Mm-hmm. You didn't want to fall off the cliff and die.
No.
And because I was able to match up the mental, capacity of the player to the cue, it worked out perfectly.
Yes. Yeah, that mental capacity, it's not that big.
Unfortunately. Left-handed, LaSalle, it all goes together. No, but that's cool that you remember that chalk line. God, I remember drawing those chalk lines. Mm-hmm. I remember those mats we used to use, those big black, and guys still use them, because you can draw on them. It makes it really easy.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't use those mats anymore, huh?
No, we use, one of our certified instructors in the Tampa area actually came up with this thing called the stance doctor. And the stance doctor took the place of the chalk and the cinder block.
Okay.
Yeah, so now I can put this piece in there, and it on a regular batter's box, mat, and it makes sure they don't squish the bug. If they're stepping out, right, it'll kind of let us know if they're stepping out. If they're diving too much, we can set it for that. If they're not striding enough, we can set a post and kind of go from there. So I've been using that a lot more. But when we're outside, for sure, like if we're doing camps and stuff, I'll have guys where we'll start on concrete just so I can say, hey, you got to get your feet right. Right. Like nothing works if you don't get your feet right in the very beginning. Mm-hmm. And that's when I was talking about the elementary groups. I don't know how many times I'm like, hey, you got to turn your back foot. It's facing the catcher, right? Mm-hmm. Turn your back foot in. Get your front foot so you're not, because what young kids try to do is they pull off of everything, so they start closed. And then the more closed, like Stan, right? Then the more closed they start, then they want to step out even more.
Yeah.
So it's like I have to go the opposite and have them learn how to open their stance and then try to come back in a little bit to fix that. Not everyone, right? But the players with that problem.
Stance Doctor. Yes, I do know of Stance Doctor in the Tampa area. Yes.
Yeah, he's in St. Pete. Yeah, Steve Schwartz, super great guy, knowledgeable instructor, really good friends. So he's really good friends with Bichette. So Bichette's all the boys, where they have like 16 sons, they all train there. And Dante, he's friends with Dante. Dante, helped out with a lot of the training down there. So that's a good spot down there. In fact, Steve was the first guy I knew that got the hit tracks. I don't know how many years ago that was, 10 years ago when it first came out.
Yeah, he's at Stance Doctor on Twitter, if you want to if you guys want to check that out. Yeah, he's got some good stuff. In the Florida area. Very good. I like that. In the Tampa area.
Yeah.
Anything I missed here as we wrap up we do have a listener question that was geared more towards the topic that we were supposed to talk about last week, which we pushed back. But anything I missed here on the internal and external cues topic and the episode?
No, I think cues are very important. Gosh, and I think learning is ever important. I was watching a clip, I think it was on Twitter or Facebook last night, and it was it was Gary Player and Jack Nicklaus, like 2 weeks ago. 70. I don't know how old Player is. 85 years? No, he's not that old, is he?
He might be in his 80s. I know Jackson. I think Jack's in his 80s.
Yeah, so Player's younger than that, he's younger than Jack a little bit. But anyway, he's still playing. Like, he's hitting balls on the range. He must have hit 100 balls, Players out there, and Jack's behind him, and they're talking about, hey, I'm trying to lengthen my swing, and Nicholas is giving him a hard time, like, you're old, man, you can't lengthen that swing. And he's like, try this, and he would try it, and Nicholas is like, nope, that ain't it.
Yeah.
That was exactly the same. And then he was talking about, gosh, when I was, my backswing used to be here. My backswing used to be here. And Nicholas said, you know what? When I won whatever, 3 majors in, 1970, I don't know what year it was. He says, sometimes my backswing was here. Sometimes my backswing was like this. Sometimes my shaft was like this in my backswing. He's like, I don't know. It's what it felt like.
Yeah.
It felt good at that time. And that blew my, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like the backswing, like he's like, yeah, it's just, but that's a guy that's feel. Like he felt like that helped him at that certain time. And that's where cues come from, Somebody may have said, hey, take the shaft straight up, when he was hitting balls. And he's like, oh my God, that felt so good. Well, it probably wasn't straight up in his backswing, but maybe it was, halfway to where it was before. He flushed it. And now he's like, boom, I got this internal cue that I'm going to run with. Yeah. And anyway, it was a really cool clip. Like if you can I'm sure you can find it. It was at that Unreal course that is in the Ozarks that I think Tiger Woods did. And they did some kind of charity thing down there a couple weeks ago. Definitely check that out. And then, one of the other things I was listening to last week's show, that I didn't do, and I was listening to it when I was taking a hike the other day. And
okay, very good. I listen to our show when I'm at the gym sometimes, by the way.
What's that?
I listen to our show sometimes when I'm at the gym in the sauna.
Yeah. No, it's just, it's good to hear things and listen. I love listening to other people talk hitting. Yeah. And, your buddy, the first thing that stuck out was, launch angle is a result. And it's absolutely a result. And when you talk about, trying to change, you can change it, but you got to know the right way to change stuff. You can swing down and hit a ball really high. Yeah. You can swing up and hit a ball really low. And so that's the result. You have to figure out, how to create a result that's consistent. I think that's the big thing. Like, where do you fit in? Yeah. And I think it was Kiermaier. Kiermaier, is that his name for the Rays? Is that how you pronounce it?
Kevin Kiermaier, yes.
Yeah. He had the lowest launch angle average of any player in the league. And if I'm not mistaken, it was negative. Like, that's a dude that
Billy
hits
Hamilton
more ground ball.
I thought Billy Hamilton had the lowest. Well, maybe Kiermaier had one of the lowest. Yeah, go ahead.
It was this year, right? So I don't know. Did Hamilton play this year? I don't even know if that guy's still playing.
Maybe I'm probably referencing.
He probably is. But anyway, it was. They said maybe it was low. His average was, or maybe it was lowest on his team, right? His average is a negative launch angle. Sure. And I thought to myself, gosh, that would just drive today's hitting people nuts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? An average negative launch. The guy's a big league player playing every single day, getting hits. Doesn't mean that he doesn't hit line drives and doesn't mean that he doesn't hit fly balls, but his misses are more of a ground ball. And so, you can't look at that. Oh, I'm going to go to Baseball Savant and say, okay, who has the highest launch angle? Yeah. It has nothing to do with what their swing plane is really doing. It could have to do with their timing, and maybe it has to do with a wrist roll. Maybe Kiermaier, when he's a little bit early, he flips. And so his normal attack angle, if you take away those flips, maybe his normal launch angle is 15 degrees, which would be awesome. But because you're mixing in all these outs where he rolls over at negative 15 degrees, now all of a sudden it averages to zero. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Oh, good
stuff. It was a good episode. I enjoyed listening.
The volume was our audio was a little but what are you gonna do? I'm glad you do subscribe to your own podcast. That's a good sign.
I do.
That's a very good sign. Let's get to our listener question here. Be sure to like and subscribe to the podcast. New episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. And again, I can't push enough our YouTube page, the Lab Epstein Hitting YouTube page for clips and previous archived episodes. And this comes to us from Jack from Parlin, New Jersey. So he actually included where he's from, which is good.
Thanks, Jack.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And he sends this to us via jimbopodcast21@gmail.com. He writes, "Hi, guys. I have a son who is 13 years old and about to jump to the big field." He puts in parentheses the 90-foot base paths. Which bat brand does Jake think would best suit him offensively?
The hottest one possible. So it depends. If he's a little fast guy that weighs, 100 pounds, then we want a dead bat. Mm-hmm. So that when he hits it, the infielder's got to run in, and he'll get hits all day long, with the infielders playing too deep.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, the bat endorsement. Yeah, I don't make any money, so this is the truth. When I look at players and the bats, so he's 13, he's probably using a drop. He's using a drop 8 or a drop 5. He's using one of those are the hottest. Okay, when you get into that drop 8, drop 5, you can still get pretty hot bats in that department before you go to the BB core, or the drop 10s. Actually, I would say the drop 5s might be hot. The what is it? Is it the Easton? Oh, now I can't remember. Doggone it. It's green. It was green and orange. Those were the hottest ones. I think they were the Makos. Did they make a new Mako? Mm-hmm. Easton. That thing's got some serious pop in it. Sure. But I will tell you that they're so close. Like when we do hit tracks, and the high school guys are constantly, when you go to BB Core, they're like very, very close. If you go to, Easton or Marucci, or even the Louisvilles. Mm-hmm. The Rawlings aren't too bad. I feel like the Rawlings have a smaller sweet spot, and they sound terrible. So that's my only nick on the Rawlings.
Yeah.
But I do feel that the Easton is probably your best bet. And I would go for one with the longest barrel. Okay. I mean, line them up. Like the longest barrel at that drop 5 weight. Mm-hmm. Is it the Marucci Cat 5 or Cat 7 or Cat 9? Those things are really good too. So look for those in that category as well. So I would probably go with one of those Cat. I don't know what the newest Cat is. If it's a Cat 9 or 7, I would look for one of those, or one of the newer Eastons as the 2 top ones that I see guys use on a daily basis. Where I'm like, that bat's got a really different sound to it because it's hot. And it's usually, and you got to hit with it a lot. Don't be afraid to take it to everybody's like, don't hit with your bat at the cages. You got to break those suckers in, man. You got to get the PSIs down. So, take it to a facility and bash balls. Now, don't bash batting cage balls, bash real baseballs, and continue to turn that bat to loosen it up, because it'll, every swing really does kind of loosen up the fibers in those things. On the heavier bats. The light bats don't do that because they'll just dent. But the -5s and BB cores definitely do that.
So that's a myth that we just put to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When you get hit real baseballs with an aluminum bat, to break
the machine's fine. Like it
Just
doesn't
not
feel
the
good if
puckered
you
balls,
get,
right?
if you
Just
hit it
not
off
those,
the end or get jammed.
just
but,
not those puckered balls. Don't hit. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad it's like kind of when people say we have to warm up your car for 30 seconds first. No, you don't. That's a myth. Doesn't do anything.
It is a myth.
It doesn't do anything.
I will say, if you're playing golf and it's cold, don't store the golf balls in your cold trunk. That's not a myth.
Okay.
Keep them in the house where it's warm.
Okay.
Because the cold golf ball does go like 10% less.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there's something you learned today.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever decide to play golf.
Nope. I'm going to stick with tennis, weightlifting, and the occasional batting.
Yeah, well, you'll get old someday, Jim.
The occasional batting cage visit. I'll be in the gym when I'm 95 years old.
There you go.
That's my goal.
I like it.
That's my goal.
You're going to be the little Italian guy talking smack to all the young kids.
Well,
I can see it with a headband on.
I won't be talking
headband.
smack. I'll still have the headband on. I won't be talking smack. I'll just be outlifting them.
There you go. I like it.
Yeah, that's my life goal. If anything. All right, well, next week we are going to be discussing the rise in strikeouts, and the episode's going to be titled Strikeout Pandemic. There's been a rise in strikeouts in the last, 5 years, really, at the major league level and, of course, the minor league level. And we're going to discuss that because I think some baseball purists, guys who played the game previously from your dad's era, from the 90s when home runs were aplenty with the steroid era, they don't really like the way the game's being played nowadays. And one of the reasons why is because they don't like the amount of strikeouts. And personally, I don't always like the amount of strikeouts that I'm seeing either. I know pitchers are better, but we're going to kind of dive into and discuss the rise in strikeouts and why it's actually happening and give our opinion on that next week.
That'll be great because it is happening, and there's different reasons for it. And that'll be a fun episode. I do know, I watched the Pods and Dodgers the other night.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a different kind of lineup the Dodgers have.
Sure.
I mean, that's 180 degrees from the Yankees, and that'll be fun to watch how that plays out. Can we get? I mean, I'm not going to say that they don't have power because they hit a ton of doubles,
mm-hmm.
right? And they hit a lot of home runs too. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think their mindset is as much. We're trying to hit it over the fences. We're trying to hit it hard.
Yeah.
So we'll see how far that takes them. And then you got the Braves that hit some jacks. So I can't wait for that series. It might be as good as any World Series.
That'll be a great series. So we will be discussing that next week. Like and subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate it. New episodes every Monday, 9 a.m. I'm at Jim Tara on Twitter and Instagram. Jake is at Epstein Hitting on both platforms. And we will talk to you next week.